Yo guys, how's it going? It's me, Arctic. Today's video, I just wanted to talk about whether or not you should roll for Ayaka or Yoimiya. I'll be giving a little bit of my information concerning both of these characters and kind of where they actually going to fit into the meta of Genshin Impact. So this isn't going to be a recommendation kind of video necessarily, but it is going to be more of like what other characters are kind of similar to both of these characters, and generally how good these characters are going to be and if they will hold up in the meta for a long term or if they're more of a short term type of character. But if you guys are new to the channel, please feel free to subscribe. I'm trying to get to 2.4k subscribers. Also, as soon as this video goes live, I will be live doing my daily Genshin stuff, as you guys know. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So really, the main two things that we're going to look at when we are searching for if you want to pull on either of these characters are how hype is the character, pretty much. Like, do you like the character, and also how good they are going to be in the game, and do you really need this type of character? And so first off, Ayaka is basically a DPS type character, focusing mostly on her auto attacks, and also a little bit of her ultimate damage and E-spell damage, basically popping out tons of cryo DPS. She's probably going to be pretty on par, I would say, with Ganyu in terms of actual DPS. A little bit of a different playstyle, and Ganyu also doubles as a support. However, Ayaka does not double as a support. She only is reliant on her own capabilities. However, Yoimiya is in a little bit of a different situation, where Yoimiya is actually both a DPS and a sub DPS, and also you can use her as like a reaction support in order to give yourself some more damage with your main DPS character, or use like Ayaka as a secondary main DPS character, which is really what Yoimiya fits into very well. There are characters like Hu Tao that perform very similarly to Yoimiya, and in my opinion, Hu Tao is just way better than Yoimiya is. However, Yoimiya's sub DPS capabilities is better than a Hu Tao, and that's about it. But in terms of auto attacks, I'm pretty sure they'll probably do a very similar damage with their auto attacks based on how both of their kits work. And so I think the biggest thing to keep in mind really is there any other characters that can do basically the same thing as Ayaka and Yoimiya are going to do in the future or currently in the game. So as we know, all of the Inazuma characters have been not leaked, but actually released in the Update 2.0 livestream. So we've got info on characters like Goro, and also Ball, and also Sara, Toma, those type of characters. Toma, we know, is going to be a Pyro Polearm, basically, from what we've been hearing. We don't know if he's going to be DPS, sub DPS, something like that. However, if he is either sub DPS or he might even be a support, that's going to make Yoimiya a little bit less likely as a pool for you to actually go for, unless you really like the character once again. Just partly because Toma, and also we have several other sub DPS type Pyro characters that actually are probably going to actually put more damage out. The one I'd really like to point to in terms of Yoimiya's case is going to be Xiangling. Xiangling you can get for free, and basically Xiangling I think is going to be better than Yoimiya overall in terms of actual sub DPS, just because you can actually set up like melt reactions with your Xiangling. However, with like Yoimiya it's a little bit harder, plus Yoimiya's like melt reaction numbers aren't going to be as crazy, and she's going to keep Pyro applied to enemies quite a bit, more than Xiangling kind of does. And once again, Hu Tao is very good for like that sub DPS kind of application. However, Hu Tao is also basically like even better of a main DPS in my opinion. She has like a reaction based burst, which is really nice for like nuke damaging things, getting large amounts of damage. Yoimiya doesn't really have any of that going for her. All she has is like her auto attacks. Now I would compare Yoimiya to a Tartaglia, and they are pretty similar in terms of what their auto attacks do. However, Tartaglia is basically more similar to a Hu Tao because of his nuke burst type of the elemental burst, and that's where I think Yoimiya really kind of falls off in with a potential meta. Like, she's going to be a pretty good sub DPS for characters like Tartaglia or Ganyu basically, and I think that is definitely a viable option to pull for her, except that yeah, Yoimiya isn't really going to be that crazy by herself. She's not going to have that great of a kit for being a main DPS. And now we get to Ayaka and where Ayaka kind of fits in here. As you guys know, we've been seeming to have tons of cryo characters being released as of recently. We've got like Ganyu, we've got Eula. Eula's more of a physical damage dealer. However, you can basically do a cryo build with like a Chongyun, for example, and deal like quite a bit of damage with that as well. And then we also have Rosaria, which is an incredible sub DPS. And so, just Rosaria as a sub DPS kind of puts Ayaka off of the sub DPS route. You can build Ayaka sub DPS, since you basically build cryo damage on her anyway, even for auto attacks. So that's why I think Ayaka is going to be kind of nice. She's going to be like a Rosaria mixed with like a Ganyu's DPS, you know. And so I think it's going to be really cool to have a character like that. But once again, it's a 5-star character and a little bit harder to get. But in terms of DPS compared to Ganya and Eula, I think this is going to be where Ayaka is going to really suffer the most in terms of actual DPS. Now, Eula's main advantage is that she does physical damage mostly, with some cryo damage, like reaction damage sprinkled in there. I personally run Eula where I have pyro characters in my team to set up melt reactions with their E, and it works very nicely for overall DPS. And you can do something similar with Ayaka's E, because her E has a pretty high damage scaling. It's a little bit higher than Eula's in terms of how much damage you're actually getting. However, Eula basically, her whole kit centers around boosting her own damage. Ayaka only focuses around her auto attacks in terms of actual damage boosts, until you get into higher constellations where her ult is going to do a resistance shred at C4. And I think after you get like C4 of that, I mean, like literally in terms of DPS, it's going to be very comparable to like a Eula, I would say. The main thing that I think is going to hold Ayaka back from being as good as Eula is because Eula's ultimate ability is basically like a elemental burst, and that really is what makes or breaks a lot of these characters that many people pull for. The reason people pulled for Ganyu is because her charger shots are basically like an elemental burst. And the reason people pulled for Eula is because their elemental burst is insane. Same reason for Tartaglia, same reason for Hu Tao, same reason for Zhongli. People pulled because of their burst was good. Now, I would say that Ayaka is probably going to be very similar to an Albedo in terms of actual burst damage, and that is probably going to be a pretty accurate summary. Ayaka might do a little bit more damage, I would say so, because of just how much like her kit kind of centers around like cryo DPS, that kind of stuff. But I think it's going to be probably pretty comparable in potency to an Albedo ultimate. But keep in mind, Albedo's ultimate costs like 60 and Ayaka's is like an 80 energy cost. And now the last thing I want to talk about Ayaka is where she's actually going to fit into the DPS of like other characters that aren't cryo ones. Now there's been a lot of talk about how Ayaka is going to be just as strong or even stronger than a Xiao, and I personally don't think that's going to be the case. And the reason why I say this is because Xiao's viability in pretty much any in-game situation is insane, because he's an Anemo character, and guess what that means? He can literally deal damage to any type of shield. He can deal damage to physical shields, however not that much, but since he's Anemo, he basically deals damage through the shield. A certain percentage of his damage goes through the shield, and you basically kill enemies before they even melt down their shield, which is an extremely good point with Xiao. Since Ayaka is cryo, you can permafreeze things, which could be pretty interesting in a freeze comp. Ayaka does have very good application, but since we are going for like basically just how good they're going to be in terms of actual DPS, I think Xiao is still going to out-trump her, especially if you build your Xiao all the way maxed out. Just in terms of auto attacks and plunge attack damage with Xiao, you're going to be getting tons of damage. Mine personally does like 39k per plunge, and that's not even, that's at the very beginning of his ults, and not even with my 3 Blackcliff stacks on. But yeah, where I think... And then if you compare Ayaka to like a Qing, for example, I think they're probably going to be kind of comparable. Like Ayaka and Keqing both don't really go for reactions, and that really kind of is what holds them back. Keqing has gotten a little bit better in terms of like using her in electrocharged comps. However, she still doesn't have a very good elemental reaction. I guess Overloaded does a lot of DPS there, but Ayaka doesn't really have access to that. Even using like Superconduct is counterintuitive because you're using Cryo DPS, unless you go with a physical DPS build. But yeah, that's about it. Now I'm going to talk about where Yoimiya would fit into like DPS kind of with all these other characters. So Yoimiya, you can use her like charge attacks for DPS and also her auto attacks for DPS. So basically the time that you have her up on the field, she's going to be doing a pretty decent amount of damage. In terms of actual damage percent, I think you're still going to get more from like a Klee or a Yan Fei in terms of actual AoE damage, that kind of stuff. Klee is probably going to be like the best for the burst damage, which I think is the same time frame that you're going for with like a Yoimiya, and it kind of sucks, but yeah, I think Yoimiya is going to be a skip for most people unless you really want a sub DPS for Tartaglia or a Ganyu is really where I think Yoimiya is going to be any good. But that's basically it for my thoughts. I just wanted to give some thoughts, kind of ramble a bit about where I think the general gameplay state of these characters is going to be. Once again, you can pull on any of these characters if you want them. Also, I will be live right after this doing my daily Genshin stuff. Just real quick, if you guys don't catch it, that's fine. But anyway, it's been me, Arctic. I'll see you guys next time. Farewell.